How do fractional CMOs hit the ground running? Hi, I'm Dean Way. Welcome to Fractional CMOs and the 90-Day Win. There's a lot of variety in how they look at or kick off a new client engagement. In fact, there's so much variety, it's valuable to just listen to what opportunities they look for, what they tackle first, and what they wish wasn't true when they start a new project. So let's find out. Maureen, hi.
Hi, how are you, Dean?
Good, thanks. Okay, so Maureen, imagine that, and we're going to talk about wins in a second. Imagine you just started a new engagement. You're the fractional CMO. We'll talk about, like I said, early wins in a moment. But first, what problems do you typically see, or what problems do you normally look for when you start a new engagement? And tell people a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Maureen Edwards. Some people will call me a serial entrepreneur because I've built 6 companies from conception to commercialization.
Wow.
So with that experience and also being in the biopharma landscape for many years across branding, marketing, sales, you name it, I've done it. I have a very multifaceted background when I come into a business because I not only can assess the business and the gaps and the opportunities there based on experience, but having that branding and marketing experience allows me to really hone in on let's talk about the problems first. I think the first issue is they don't know what marketing does.
Right.
If they are brand new to this, marketing is something that is very foreign to them, and they think it's more overhead than it is revenue generating. So I think you have to sit down first and set those expectations and give them a little understanding if they aren't quite there yet. As soon as I get into an organization, there are 2 things that I do. One, I want to see everything they have done. And if they've done nothing, okay, we'll look at something else. But I want to see all of their metrics, 100% of their metrics. And I work with a lot of startups, and startups sometimes have nothing to go by. But the metrics drive the creative. And if I can identify the data gaps, it'll give me a much clearer roadmap of where the strategy is going to go and the specific tactics that we have to have. So I pull all of that. I want to see all of it from end to end. And I've experienced that even large companies don't monitor their metrics or even know where to find them. All right. So that's a huge gap. So I want to see that. If somebody has been doing a lot of marketing, they've even put together a strong online presence, they're in, part of it. They may have worked with vendors, or they may even have a marketing manager or something there, and they're not scaling or they're not even getting traction. I want to look at who is your target audience? Is it niched enough? What is your value prop? How are you changing these people's lives? And are you different than anybody else? And let's pull out those differentiators. And then finally, how are you messaging this? Because you don't necessarily have a marketing problem, you have a messaging problem.
How common is it that someone has a messaging problem?
I built my entire company that I do now on that. I work with business owners and turnarounds, basically, of people who jumped to marketing and never built the real foundation of their company, which is the branding aspect, which are those pillars that I just talked about. Because if you're showing up on marketing and you don't know what to say to them, and you don't even know them well enough to know what would be relevant or what would resonate, they get on marketing and they put all of these marketing programs together and they go, why isn't anybody moving? I said, because you're showing up with something they don't even want to hear.
Yeah, I built my whole company on just what a company says to prospects in the first 3 or 4 seconds. Like my whole company just lives in that slice. No one knows how to start. Brad, how about you? What kind of problems do you normally look for, or do you just tend to find a lot with the kind of clients that you work with?
Yeah, and just to introduce myself.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm Brad Schlachter, also a fractional CMO, and I've spent most of my career in the entertainment and technology and media space. And so I've worked for big companies like Disney and Microsoft, as well as a number of video streaming services like Hallmark and Motor Trend, and a lot of digital media, digital publications as well. So really content and technology focused companies. And like Maureen, I mean, it is pretty common to, especially with startups. I mean, when you work with sort of, scrappy startups, a lot of times I get a call or they're interested in talking to me when they get some funding and they're like, okay, we want to scale now. We want to show our investors,
Right.
that we're a good investment and we can scale quickly. And a lot of times they have not really gone through the process or really refined the process of, okay, is their product service or service, is there really a strong need? Is there a good product market fit? And Maureen talked about, positioning. Yeah. So what's different and better and special about your product or service? Sometimes they'll list a bunch. There's one sort of common problem I see is companies tend to talk about features and not about benefits. So, our product can do this, this, and this, and this. Okay, why should the consumer or the end user care? What problem are you solving? So you see a lot of companies not crafting their language in a way that's compelling or interesting to their target audience. They may not, they are maybe UI UX issues where the call to actions aren't in prominent positions, and there's a lot of those are sort of like low hanging fruit opportunities to rectify. So.
Okay, so let's stay with that for a second and sort of pivot it. What kind of like early wins, and I hate this phrase, but what kind of like low hanging fruit do you like to get done in the first 90 days of, let's say you've got a 1-year engagement, right? And a lot of your stuff's going to be below the waterline for the first 30, 60, 90, right? There's discovery, there's interviews, there's planning, like what kind of like above the waterline early wins do you like, if you can, get done in the first 90 days? And then we'll switch back to Maureen.
Sure. Do you want me to start? Or?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I have a whole methodology and, certainly I think it starts for me a lot of times making sure that, first of all, everyone's aligned on what success is going to equal and what the goals are. And then, doing an audit, as Maureen mentioned earlier, really digging into what they're doing now, what's working, what's not working. And then coming up with a plan on, hey, this is where we are now, this is where we want to be, and the plan is like how you're going to get there. But the other thing that I think that isn't said, but is also really important during the first 90 days,
right,
is you really need to build relationships, you need to build trust, you need to get allies. And if you're a fractional CMO and you're in a B2B company, really knowing how to building out a relationship with the head of sales and being supporting sales, for example, is certainly something that's going to be really important. And so, I mean, those are some of the things that aren't really said, but I think ultimately are going to determine if you're going to be able to succeed, because it's not just what you say or what you recommend, but how you interact and build trust, and are you able to drive consensus-based decisions, and all that is the sort of the soft skills of marketing that really, I think, or play a big role in whether you're going to be successful or not.
Maureen, how about you? What kind of early wins, low-hanging fruit?
I will tell you, totally agree with Brad. And that's something that I find people will get into, whether they're a permanent employee or fractional, and they just go full force, kind of on their own agenda sometimes, because they are the expert. They've been hired for all this stuff. But it isn't necessarily the implementation of tactics and ideas you have. It's really coming in and saying, how do we partner together? Where's the synergy? Where are we going to take this to the next level? I'm not the only one here. This is us working together. And I think that's an early win, just like what Brad said, right off from the bat, because right there, you have won trust. You have won the commitment to them working with you. And you also have to set expectations. Am I managing these people? Right? Am I managing them? Or am I just kind of partnering and overseeing things? So you have to make sure that role is clear, because there's a different dynamic if you are taking over a department and you're now their boss, right? So I think that's the first win. And I think the second win is when you actually put the first campaign together and you're able to demonstrate results, you worked as a team, and now you're going to look at the outcomes. And that's what builds that, oh my gosh, that moved the needle. That kind of sets the whole tone. And you go from there. So those are the two things that I work on.
Okay. What do you find your clients normally don't see or know about until you start working with them?
They don't understand the marketing process. And I've had some of the biggest CEOs and some of the biggest companies, they think that when you send out the first email, they're going to go ahead and convert 1 million people. Mm-hmm. And I've literally had them come back and say, gosh, this campaign, we bought into it. It's so awesome. You implemented it beautifully, but where are all the conversions? And they have to understand it's very multifaceted. There are so many moving parts, and revenue may not be generated with one email, that we have to set those expectations. And remember what marketing is for. It's to build brand awareness. It's to engage the right fit customer. And it's acquisition by coming out with the right leads that are appropriate for conversion to hand over to the sales department to take it to the next step.
And Brad, what do you think? What do clients normally not know or don't even see about their own business until you start working with them?
Yeah, no, I've had definitely similar experience. Managing expectations is certainly important. And in terms of, people understanding that, marketing is a process. And if it's a B2C client, you can talk about reach, but there's effective reach, which means you usually have to reach a customer, 3 times before it becomes effective. And there's, and you're obviously everything has to work together, right? Your email, your social media, your advertising, there's all these different touch points, and you have to orchestrate that. The other thing that I think that requires, some patience, but I think is so important, at least for a lot of companies that I'm working with, because I'm working with a lot of companies who are in the content space in one form or the other. And organic traffic is, certainly growing organic traffic is usually high on people's lists. And SEO is really important, especially for building that strong foundation for organic growth going forward. But SEO is something that takes some time, right? And you need to develop your keyword strategy and then the content, and then it takes a little while for all that stuff to register with Google before you start seeing positive results. So there's certainly things you can do that are quick and easy wins with potentially with paid and with making sure you're the conversion rate optimization and all the pages are just are designed better for conversion, and those are some things that you can usually impact pretty quickly. But some of the longer term strategic things like that organic growth are going to take more time, and you do have to sort of set expectations and manage those up front.
So besides that, or maybe specific to the situations we talk about here, what should a CEO understand about fractional CMOs to get maximum value, squeeze every last penny of value out of their fractional CMO? Brad, and then we'll switch to Maureen.
Yeah, I think one thing that I sometimes struggle with is, when you work for bigger companies or medium-sized companies, they typically have a team, and they really could rely on a fractional CMO for primarily, strategic input. And I think that's where I think, ultimately we're going to be able to provide the most value. But when you're working for a scrappy startup, a lot of times you also need to be sort of that individual contributor as well. And that's fine, but you're not going to get maximum value out of your fractional CMO who perhaps has 20 or 30 years of experience, having them get into the weeds and being too tactical. So I think there's always there's always a little bit of that juggling between being that individual contributor versus being the strategic voice. And obviously the benefit is that they're only paying for you on a part-time basis, so they're getting that experience where they normally wouldn't be able to afford someone with that level of experience, on a full-time role. But you don't want to get someone on a fractional level and then have them drown in tactical things, because then you're really not getting the most value out of all their skills and experience.
And Maureen, what do you think CEOs would need to understand, or ELTs or boards would need to understand about fractional CMOs to get maximum value from you?
I think I agree with Brad. It's sitting down and having the expectations that the fractional person is there for a fraction of time, and you are there to take advantage and tap into the wisdom and the experience that you can't afford, at this point. But I think that one of the things they have to understand too is you may not be able to afford somebody full time, but you still have to afford them the opportunity to work with a budget and have money available to them, because I have found that, they'll hire you, they'll get you in there, you'll put strategy together, you can even build a marketing department from the ground up. I've done that so many times and all the processes, but then you go beyond that organic that they're so reliant on, like, why aren't we growing with no money, where you have to sit down and say, look, I've assessed the situation, and this is how much money we will need in a budget to be able to move the needle based on what you are looking at financially as far as your goals. So I think that could be a sticking point, as well as them thinking you're on call all the time. Whereas fractional, that's what it means, is that it's a set amount of hours, and then you kind of get that scope creep that comes in, and that is something you have to have a conversation about. Where do we spend our time?
Right. And okay, so let's stick with that a tiny bit further. I guess at this point you've probably got your qualification and prospecting and vetting process ironed out, but are there signs as you're talking to a client or a prospect, let's say, that they're not ready for a fractional CMO yet, or they should not hire a fractional CMO? Are there any red flags, Maureen?
Oh, okay. One, I think a big red flag is they don't know anything about marketing. Right there. They don't know what they don't know. And when you come in and explain it, they are still not quite sure and not quite getting it. At that point, I don't think you're in alignment, because it's going to take you a very long time to prove it, to educate them, give them patience, right? Try and train them, all of that. So a red flag for me is when they absolutely have no idea about the marketing process, the marketing budgets, and where a fractional CMO would be able to take them to the next step, as well as them thinking that that person is coming in and going to get every single strategic thing done and tactical, because you're the only one maybe on call.
Right.
You don't have a team to turn it. Yeah, you're it. And they're thinking, well, I got strategy, I got tactics, I've got meetings for you, and you're in the weeds.
Yeah. And I only have to pay you 1 day a week, and I get 5 days a week worth of CMO.
Yeah.
Brad, has that ever happened? You're brought in as fractional, and it's just the scope expands past what the agreement said?
It does. And just to the earlier point that Maureen was making, a red flag I've experienced is because I've worked with a number of legacy media companies like Hallmark, but in the digital space, or Motor Trend in the digital space, and I can provide some other examples. One red flag for me is when you talk to different people in different departments and they're not aligned on goals, or the people on the legacy side of the business feel threatened by the people on the digital side of the business. And the assumption is that, if you're growing the business on the digital side, it's taking away from maybe the traditional aspect of the business, and people get very defensive and territorial, right? and I can give you, I've had that happen a number of different times. And so if I'm going to a company that has both sort of a legacy and a digital component, and if I'm going to be working on the digital side, I want to make sure that everyone's really clear on what we're going to be doing, and that there's comfort within the organization or support within the organization for that path. Otherwise, it just makes your job that much harder. So,
hey, Maureen, I want to put, as we finish up, I want to throw a hypothetical and see what you want to say about it. Imagine that for some reason you get tapped and they say, "Hey, Maureen, we're kind of like really busy, and you probably do a good job at this. Can you go ahead and interview and select the next head of sales?" What are you looking for? What are the green flags and red flags about a fractional CMO hiring, let's say a fractional head of sales?
I think the first thing I look at is how do they see the partnership with marketing? Because in my experience, there's been a lot of silos, and I think Brad kind of alluded to this, is that people are not on the same page. So I really want to get an idea of how that person plans on partnering with me. What is their mentality behind collaboration and behind working marketing and sales together? So I really want to qualify that out. Sometimes we're sales, we're commercial, we implement the sales force to, take your sales aids and get this, and this done. I said, that's all great, but your sales aids your salespeople are very valuable to me to build those sales aids and to get the message out there. And so I want to make sure they understand that we work together, so I can give them the best opportunity for their reps to message the right thing. And I don't know that until they're willing to have me part of the team and integrated. So that to me is kind of what I want to qualify out first.
Right.
And I think the green flag, the one where I say, this SE, this commercial operations person is very confident. And when I see confidence in their own skin, where they are not a fearful leader, they will hire people better than themselves to build a well-rounded, diverse team. When I see that, I get so excited and I go, you know what? This person's going to be in alignment with me.
That's a good answer. That might be like a perfect answer. Brad, I have a different hypothetical for you. CEO says, "Hey, I kind of got lucky hiring you. I don't think lightning's going to strike twice. Can you go ahead and pick, interview and hire the full-time CMO that we're now ready for?" What are the green flags and red flags around those candidates?
Yeah, interesting question. It really, I think it depends a lot on what was the nature of the understanding, because I've been in roles where they say, "Hey, this is fractional to start, but if you're interested, it could become a full-time role." And so if there was all of a sudden, "Hey, we love you, but we don't want to hire you."
Let's assume a hypothetical where they love you, but you've all agreed you've done what you can do, and it's time to cycle out.
Okay. Well, in that case, less awkward, right? But I think, to me, I don't think that's really a red flag. Like for me, that makes sense. I've been marketing for a long time. I have a really big network of people in the industry, including lots of other marketers who I've worked with, who I respect and are talented. And so to me, that makes a lot of sense for me to, and obviously it's my area of subject matter expertise. And so for me to help be involved in that vetting process makes sense. I've actually, I don't know if I'd call it a red flag, but I've been in situations where CEOs have asked me to help hire, like a CTO or people where I don't have the subject matter expertise, or I really don't know the right questions to ask, or and to me that's a bigger issue, because I may be able to tell if a potential CTO is a good fit from a cultural perspective, but I'm not going to know if he has the technical chops to do the job, or at least it's going
Do
to
you
be a
think
lot
it's a
harder for me
different
to
kind of
earn that.
mindset or skill set or experience that you'd be looking for if after being like, the 1 day a week fractional CMO for a client for, let's say, a couple of years and you're ready to move on? And do you think it's a different skill set to hire in a full-time CMO than like looking for, another fractional or just maybe an interim CMO?
I mean, I think I can't speak for everyone. I mean, from my experience, most fractional CMOs that I know have been full time,
Yeah, me too.
marketing leaders, earlier in their careers. I think it's just what stage of someone's career is and what they're looking for. Do they want the flexibility of being a fractional CMO versus the stability of a full time job, and and maybe they don't want to look, always sort of feel like they're under pressure to hire to get new clients. And so there's just pros and cons, right? So, but I think as a fractional CMO myself, who spent most of my career in full-time roles, I don't think it's really much of a leap to think that, someone who's been a fractional person could become, to become full-time or full-time become fractional. I think most of us have probably done both.
At this point, I think I know well over 1,000 fractional CMOs. They're the biggest part of my business, and it didn't occur to me to, just as you were talking then. I imagine for one reason, a lot of startups hire fractional CMOs because of budgeting, and they're also getting started. So, but in a way, it also, there'd be a lot of sort of like mental fit, cultural fit of a startup hiring a fractional CMO, in that it's an entrepreneur of a business hiring an entrepreneur of marketing, right? A self-employed person to come in and do the marketing when you're hiring a fractional CMO as a startup. So, there'd be a lot of, yeah, I get this. Like, I know that, I need to make payroll. I know we need to like sign a customer, the kind of stuff that like startups would be obsessed with. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that before. See, I finally made a connection on something. Yay me. Okay. So I think that wraps this up. Brad, and then we'll switch to Maureen. Can you tell people how to find you? Where would they find you if they were looking for you?
I can start.
Sure.
So I have two separate companies. It's Do It For You Agency, which is ingenicom.com, and that's with one N, INNE. And the other is Do It With You, for business owners who want to build their business from the ground up, and that's 8simplesteps.net. And I am all over, Facebook, LinkedIn with me, both personally and on my company pages. And let's have a conversation.
And Brad, how do people find you? What's your website?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to find me. There's not too many Brad Schlachters out there. There are some, and I actually know another one, but there's very few of us, especially who are fractional CMOs. So LinkedIn is a great channel. Also, my website, it's risebusinessventures.com. So feel free to check out my website or check me out on LinkedIn. I'm on other social channels as well, but I'm the most active on LinkedIn.
All right. Thanks, you guys. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you today. And thanks, everyone, for watching. And we'll be back soon.
Thank you for the opportunity, Dean. Brad, it was so nice meeting you. And let's connect.
Thank you.